Hey, everybody. Welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I am Chris Peters, joined as always by Cam Robinson. And we got a lot of excitement happening in the hockey world as always. Before we get to that, though, Cam, how the heck are you? How's everything in your life these days?
Yeah, I'm doing well. The wife's out of town. She took the tiny baby. I've got the two older ones here, so I am juggling mom and dad duties, lunches, dinners, laundry, driving around town, and then chatting with you. So this is it's busy times, so it's good times. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, you know what? I'm doing all right. Just back from the AHL All-Star Classic in sunny
Yeah.
Palm Desert, California. That was pretty awesome. Make sure, if you haven't yet, check out all the content we have on FloHockey and the FloHockey social channels, because holy smokes, do we get a lot of stuff, and there's even more to come. We've got Yaroslav Askarov mic'd up, always entertaining. We've got, behind-the-scenes footage. Our own Matt Cotrelli was on the ice with the All-Stars during the skills challenge. So a lot of really cool imagery and some great personalities there. So that was cool. And then, yeah, I mean, we're just in a, like you, we're kind of in a mess of youth hockey and everything else going on. But, your wife is getting a break now. Well, maybe not, because she has the tiny baby with her, but you're going to the Four Nations Faceoff. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today. If you know anything about me and if you know anything about Cam, we love international hockey. And we have been deprived for about 8 years of something at this scale, at least in terms of the quality of talent. It's still not everybody involved, but Four Nations, we have it. Cam, you're going to be there. I just want to quickly, get your sense. And again, this starts next week. We're recording this on Thursday. You got Canada versus Sweden, coming up on Wednesday, February 12th, to get things kicked off in Montreal. I mean, just how excited are you to kind of have a chance to witness this and see what's going on there?
I'm very excited. I'm very excited. When this was put on my bingo card for travel this year, I was like, "Whoo, this is going to be fun," because, first and foremost, like, I'm not scouting. I'm not plugging in any game reports for this tournament, right? We know the run of the down of these guys. So I just get to sit back and watch it, like a whole host of future Hall of Famers battling it out, right? And so I know I've seen some things on Twitter and people talking like that. They're like, it's kind of like a glorified all-star game. We saw Pietrangelo pull out, even though he's not injured enough to sit out of games, and that the players aren't taking it seriously. And that is not how it is. Like these players are taking this very seriously. They want to go, players that are battling injuries or like trying to convince their clubs that they're healthy enough to go. A guy like Drew Doughty was kind of racing back to try to prove that he's ready to fill in for that Pietrangelo spot. Or we saw Mackenzie Weegar talking about, he's like, I got a real fancy 2-week trip to Mexico all lined up that I'm willing to throw down the garbage here so I can come and represent my country. So I think it's not quite Olympic level, but it is for these players that are there. There is, nationalistic pride on the line and a chance to audition potentially for that 2026 Olympics in Italy too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that the fans in Montreal and Boston should hopefully do it upright. I know the tariffs have been put on pause here, the American tariffs, but I'm still hoping that we get some booze rating down for the Canadian American game and really get a spicy atmosphere. But no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think obviously now you've got this political backdrop to it, and there's all sorts of things happening. But I think no matter how you slice it, a USA Canada game is always going to have the passion. And I agree with you. I mean, I had my own skepticism about the event in terms of, player interest and how much. But I think the more you hear the players talk about it, the more that if nothing else, they've convinced themselves that this is going to be an important thing for them. And I think it's not quite at the level, World Cups and Canada Cups and things like that have always been there. But the reason that this matters more to me than I thought it would was just, thinking back to, we've basically been robbed of 8 years. Honestly, the NHL fumbled massively in over 8 years to not have the the fact we're waiting for this Connor McDavid versus Austin Matthews moment in national colors is kind of crazy. And so now we have that. And you've got all kind of other things that have raised the tensions, if you will, in this whole battle. But really what it comes down to is the very best put in a competitive environment. And I think that they can't shut that part of their brain off, especially when they're wearing their nation's colors. So I'm really excited to see what it's all going to look like. Canada opens up with Sweden, USA versus Finland, and so we're going to have some really good stuff. So today, I kind of wanted to talk about the teams. There are some uncertainty, obviously, with the timing of this tournament. Injuries have kind of made a couple of roster situations different. Alex Pietrangelo obviously already pulled out of his own volition. And then, we're just kind of waiting to see what else is going to happen. A couple of injuries here and there. Sidney Crosby did skate today. There was some doubt about him. Quinn Hughes in Vancouver hasn't played in the last little bit. So, we'll talk about some of that. But I also wanted to kind of highlight some of the real traits of these teams, and I want to start it off with Canada, because Cam, I mean, you're a Canadian, you're a proud Canadian, and really we've got Crosby, McKinnon, and McDavid in the same lineup. Assuming we're pretty sure Sid will be there, but assuming that all happens, you've got. I mean, that's a dream scenario for any country. You look back at like the '96 World Cup, or the lines as they were, and it was like Yzerman was like a fourth liner on that team. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
there's so many crazy things, but now we're looking at that with Canada, and you've got some of the very, very best in the mix here.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, like, no one can touch Canada up front, right? Like, so you mentioned those three big names, and then it's like, oh, why don't we just have like Braden Point and Sam Reinhart, who's like looking like a perennial 50-goal guy, Mark Stone just down the lineup, Mitch Marner, just like, these guys, Sam Bennett, Anthony Cirelli, like, it's just Brendan Hagel, like, so much talent and like hard skill. They're not going to have any problem scoring goals. I do want to say, I think it's pretty hilarious that Nate McKinnon doesn't have a letter on that team. I know letters don't mean anything. We can talk about that for the American side too, but I did. I don't know if everybody caught Coach Chippy's little video that he made about it. That I thought that was pretty good. Is that, Nate Mack not wearing a letter for them. But also, I think you're absolutely right that they did fumble the bag. Like, I look at a guy like Steven Stamkos, he's never got an opportunity to play on like a best on best. Broke his leg for the 2014 Olympics, missed out on that, and now he's just aged out. Now he's just missed it. Like, what a waste, right? That we don't get to see a player like him, a future Hall of Famer, a former 60-goal guy. So I think it's excellent. I know a lot of people are like, just keep the season rolling. Like, we're in it right now. Keep it going. Like, who cares about this break? It's important to get these type of tournaments going, and get an opportunity to see the best on best. And for Canada to have that, to give Sid a chance to go out there and play against these guys again. And, I think he's got a perfect record captaining Canada too. So they certainly are hoping that he's going to be there wearing the C for them, and he can drive the bus for them every which way.
Yeah, I mean, you look up and down this lineup, and the fact of just the depth that Canada has and the incredible amount of skill and talent, and then you go to the back end and you've got Cale Makar back there. We haven't found out who's going to replace Pietrangelo yet. But I think that's going to be really interesting overall, just the way that blue line shakes out. But we'll also talk a little bit about the goaltending later, which I think has been a hot topic in Canada for years, really. And it's never seemed more obvious than it does right now that there's limitations in that regard. But if you, aside from the goaltending, which I think everybody's kind of penciled in as this weak point of the team, are there any other points on this roster that you as a Canadian are at least a little concerned about? I think forward kind of speaks for itself, but are there any points in this roster where you say, maybe the construction could have used a tweak here or there?
I mean, I guess you could point at maybe some puck moving on the blue line. Not to, obviously Makar is all world, generational nearly. Josh Morrissey moves the puck really, really well. Shea Theodore does too. But, having Parayko and Sanheim and Devon Taves, it's like they are good players and they bring different elements to the game. But it'll be really interesting who they do choose to replace Pietrangelo with. Evan Bouchard is there, someone who generates a ton of offense, right? He's sitting there waiting, hoping. There's been talk of Chris Tanev, a defensive specialist, a shot blocker, a warrior. I mentioned Mackenzie Weegar, who can play both sides of the rink. I'll just say this, is that speaking to people who would have better knowledge base than I do on it, is the expectation is that it's going to be Drew Doughty. Number one, he's an excellent player and, has been just tremendous for Canada internationally for a long, long time, right? Forever. I think that he would have to prove that he's not ready for him to not be picked. So I do expect that to be Drew Doughty, and he will bring some playmaking and some puck moving and some offensive ability up there as well, too, even at his kind of advanced age, as I say, as he's younger than I am by 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so it's maybe on that blue line a little bit once you get past the Makar, that top pairing sort of thing. Is that, are they going to be able to generate? But the forwards are so talented too that you don't need a lot. You know, you don't need to be too creative. You just need a stretch pass to get it up to them, and they should be able to do the work too.
Yeah, the good first pass that we always hear about is really all you need. It feels like, to just put it in the hands of Sid, of Connor McDavid. But you know, let's, you know, we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth in a little bit, but I did want to talk about the goaltending too. At this point, you've got Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, Samuel Montembeault. You know, obviously none of them right now would be among the best Canadian goalies in the league. You know, the fact that they had to announce these rosters so early, maybe with that position in particular being the one that had the most questions, I feel like, about it. You know, none of them are the best Canadian goalie in the league right now. So what say you about the goaltending? How big of a concern is it? And is Canada just going to outscore everybody and it's not going to matter?
I think it will matter. And, you know, unfortunately, sorry, Finnish fans or those listening back home, is that yes, it won't matter against a team like Finland. But when you come down to it against the Americans, and even the Swedes to a slightly lesser degree, I think that they're going to need saves. They're going to need clutch saves. I don't expect they're going to be, you know, winning games 6-5. Like, you know, that's not what they're going to be looking to do. Is they will have to win some tight, low scoring games at points in this tournament as well. And so, you know, Logan Thompson not being named to this team as he's one of the best goaltenders in the league, arguably, you know, a Vezina finalist. He's looking like he's heading down that stretch after being good for the Golden Knights the last couple of years too. Huge omission. And like, yeah, you know, Aiden Hill, Sam Montembeault, like I guess Jordan Binnington has the Stanley Cup and he's got the resume, but like none of these guys are posting great numbers. It's like, and I was floored that they went with Montembeault over him. So that is going to probably be a factor. Not to say that he would have been the star savior for them in the crease, but I think he would have been the projected starter of this team. And to have your projected starter not even be there at this point it's an omission. It's a mistake. And so for Team Canada, they're hoping that they will be able to score themselves out of trouble or defend themselves out of trouble, which may bleed into, you know, I just said it's going to be Drew Doughty, who is, you know, an excellent two-way guy, but maybe it is a guy like Chris Tanev or Mackenzie Weegar who plays more of that shutdown role so that they can try to, you know, really lock things down. And I think that did come into play a little bit with some of their other defensive choices too. So they're gonna want to play a nice, staunch defensive game in their own end and not really open it up and let those forwards really run wild too much in some of these tighter games as it goes down the stretch, because it's going to be difficult to trust that goaltending with your full heart. I will just say, and I'm not a fan of him as an individual with his antics, but Binnington has had stretches where he can be lights out. So I think that they are really banking that they can find, you know, 2019 playoff Binnington or 2018, whatever it was, playoff Binnington, that he can really just lock it down for 10 days and everything will be forgiven.
Yeah, you almost wonder, with the high stakes emotional nature of international hockey, how that's gonna get his competitive juices going positively or negatively. You know, so we will have to wait and see. I mean, excuse me, looking at Canada's overall roster, it's going to be very difficult to pick against them. You know, I think that there's definitely, you know, the U.S., which we're going to talk about next, but the U.S. has certainly the best chance of all the rosters in terms of depth and obviously goaltending being a significant advantage for the U.S. But, you know, I mean, basically, if Canada is going to win this thing, how do you think they're going to win it? You kind of mentioned it a little bit. You don't think that they're just going to be able to outscore everybody. So, you know, what are going to be the hallmarks of a winning Canadian team at this Four Nations Faceoff?
Well, it's obviously lots of speed, lots of skill, but they didn't bring a player like Sam Bennett there to, you know, give flowers to the other team, right? He is going to be in those guys' kitchens, right? Like he is going to be bringing some nasty and just getting under everybody's skin. They don't have, like, it's not a big smash mouth team, I wouldn't say. Like they didn't bring Tom Wilson, and they didn't bring these guys that are really going to run you through the end boards like that traditional Canadian hockey model that they had for so long, where it's like run them up or, run it up or fill them in, right? And so, but I do think that everybody's going to be playing a little nasty out there. They got Brad Marchand, another one who's just a shit disturber, right? Like they're going to have these type of guys. Seth Jarvis can get under skin too. So I think everybody will kind of play their part in playing that agitating hard skill game. And then the blue line does have some pillars, some of those big redwood trees back there that are going to bang and crash. But I mean, the Americans have guys like that too. So it's skill for skill. It's like those two teams are kind of in a class all to their own with the hard skill, with the heavy hitting, with the agitation. So I think, anything can happen in a short tournament like this, but we do expect that it's going to be Canada, USA at the end. And it's just going to kind of be like an all out brawl to see who can come away champs.
Let's hope, right? I mean, like, let's hope that it's that kind of contest. And yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that both teams, you're looking at that top nine, true top nine, but even your fourth line is going to be able to score goals. And that brings me over to the U.S. because I do want to talk about, this team and really when you look at the American teams that we've seen at other best on best tournaments, the 2016 World Cup, a lot of their best players were on Team North America. So they did not have a very competitive team. That was a disaster of a tournament and really a confidence shaking thing. But we have this new golden age of American player now, and it's Austin Matthews, it's Jack Eichel, it's Jack Hughes, it's Quinn Hughes, it's Adam Fox. You've got two Norris Trophy winners on this blue line. You've got Brock Faber, who's already played in the Olympics at his young age. Zach Werenski, who's having this remarkable season. That putting himself in the category. So there's a lot of really exciting things. Obviously Matthew and Brady Tkachuk too have to mention them. But, I think really for this American team, every single tournament the U.S. has won, whether it's the 1980 Olympics, whether it is the 96 World Cup, whether, even their World Juniors, very typically it is because they've gotten the best goaltending. And I think they have pound for pound the best goalie in this entire tournament in Connor Hellebuyck. And if you've also got Jake Ottinger and Jeremy Swayman, but it's all about Connor Hellebuyck. And to me, that's the separating factor for USA among all these teams, is that you've got the best goalie. Does that mean you have the best chance to win? That remains to be seen. But I mean, to me, I think Connor Hellebuyck is the X factor of this team. What do you think about the goaltending, and how much of a role can that play, given the fact that they're going up against some of the best offensive talents in the entire league?
I mean, the way Hellebuyck has been playing the last, couple of years here, he's like prime Luongo. It's like one of these things where it's like when he gets beat, you're almost like, how did that happen, right? And so when we saw prime Luongo play for Canada internationally, it was like no one's beating them. They're winning gold because, if you can get past that wave of offense, if you can get past those Hall of Fame defensemen, you still have to get past this guy too. So I think you're absolutely right. Hellebuyck is in front of the class by a country mile, and then there's every other goaltender here. And then if they did falter, right, throwing in Jake Ottinger, it's like, oh, poor them, right? Compared to some of these what these other countries have. And they Swayman, they didn't even bring Demko. Like they have just a glut of talent in net for the Americans. But I think you're absolutely right. Like on the blue line, so much puck moving too. They've got Jacob Slavin. They've got Noah Hannafin, who can Charlie Mack. They can play some defensive roles too. They don't have maybe those big smash mouth guys that are really going to like punish players as they come near the front of the net or in the corners, but it's going to be like good luck stopping them moving the puck, right? Like you mentioned with Fox and with Quinn Hughes. Even Quinn Hughes at like 90% is arguably, the Hart Trophy leader at this point. He's been so excellent. He's been amazing. He's probably going to win a second back-to-back Norris here. And Werenski, right? You probably in the Hart conversation too. And then up front, like we talked about, like they have so much skill. Like if I was putting money down after you called me a proud Canadian and I picked the Americans to win the World Juniors, they will take my passport away at some point. Is that it's hard to bet against this American team. One of the reasons you kind of want to hedge to Canada is because of like the experience of a Sidney Crosby, right? Or Connor McDavid being the greatest player on the planet, or potentially ever most talented player, is that they have those kind of guys that could just edge them, but on like a whole, it's hard to argue that the Americans don't have like a better constructed, more well-rounded team to really run it up at this event.
Yeah, balance is going to be interesting because you mentioned it too with those the puck moving capabilities of this blue line. Really, you look up and down. Noah Hannafin, Jacob Slavin are the guys that are kind of like, hey, those are guys that you feel are stoppers, that are true, defenders. Brock Faber is kind of in that category as well. To a certain extent, and then you've got just this immense amount of skill. Charlie McAvoy is kind of one of those great two-way guys. I just think that in terms of the blue line, I don't know that you could have possibly built a better one, based on what is in this group. And it was one of those things where it's like, hey, the best players are the best players, and they are going to do the things. I mean, I think the only guy that, the way that he's played since he got snubbed, Jake Sanderson, would have kind of liked to see some of that youth more of that youth on the blue line, because he's the same age as Brock Faber, same birth year. I think those two guys are going to be cornerstone pieces of an Olympic team. I think they have that capability. But man, I am really excited to see how it all works. And yeah, they don't have that smash mouth blue line that can win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think in an international tournament where speed is at a premium, puck movement and puck possession are going to be the two things most critical. And this is a blue line where I just feel pretty strongly, if you give me the Canadian blue line versus the American blue line, I'm taking the American blue line all day. And you've got, and really even Adam Fox, who I think has not played at that Norris Trophy level for a while. If he's down your lineup, like if he's a 6 or a 5 on your team, how good is your team? So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. But I did want to talk about the forwards as well, because, Canada is definitely going to have the talent advantage there. But the gap between the U.S. and Canada, I don't feel is very big. And you've mentioned that as well. Who are the top, the top guys? You've got, Hughes, Eichel, Matthews, all, those guys, the Kachucks. There's size up front. There's some physicality up front. There is a lot of skill and a lot of speed. On top of that, you have gifted goal scorers like Jake Gensel. You have Kyle Connor. You have, a guy that's a good two-way kind of guy who's really found his game in Matt Boldy. Even down to the fourth line, I think Brock Nelson is one of the undersung guys on this roster, but I think he's going to be a critical piece of this team in limited minutes. He's the kind of guy, he's a multi-time 30 goal scorer, but he's a tremendous two-way player. He's played a lot of international hockey. He's probably the least heralded, most underrated guy on this team, but he is one of those players that I remember when he got drafted, I was like, I don't know about this guy. And in college, I don't know about this guy. He gets to the pros and is like, oh my gosh, he has got it figured out. So even down at the fourth line level, USA, and they didn't do the World Cup. One of the first guys they named to the team was Justin Abdelkader, and no disrespect to Justin Abdelkader, but you don't exactly think of him in a best on best situation. I look up and down USA's roster and I see a best on best forward group with no real argument there. I mean, anything on your end, is there anything with that group that you think is lacking, or just in, what are the things that you think that group's going to need to do to be able to compete and score against, a team like Canada, a team like Finland, because I mean, really scoring in international hockey when there's that much talent on the ice, it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, but they do have the one-shot finishers, right? Like Matthews is the most gifted finisher in the world.
Of course.
I mean, the Kachuk boys are going to will that puck into the net by any means necessary, right? Get greasy, get nasty to do it. Kyle Connor, pure finisher, right? Yeah, Eichel is having a career season, and we've known he's been such a talented player all these years. Larkin, just like speed for days down the lineup. JT Miller's going to bring that bulldog, that big, massive frame of his, and that power game with loads of skill. He seems rejuvenated now. He's in New York with his best buddy Vincent Trocheck, who maybe they end up playing together down the lineup too, something like that. So, if I had to nitpick it, it's like Chris Kreider doesn't deserve to be on this team. I don't think that that's a hot take. He hasn't, he wasn't great last year. He hasn't been great this year. When you've got a guy like Tage Thompson, who's been ripping it up, For Buffalo, I know he got knocked, so he's might not have been available anyways. But like I think that was a miss, or Clayton Keller or Jason Robertson or something. There was better options there. I know Kreider brings some veteran presence, and he does still have the speed element, and he's a big body, so he can work the net front and stuff. But that's probably the only weak point up front where you could be like, that could be filled by a better player. Or more talented player at this juncture, but maybe he's going to be the glue guy in the room, right? Maybe he's going to be the one that brings them all together. So I'm not in that room, so I won't bash him too hard. But no, up front, they're gonna be able to hit, they're gonna be able to skate, they're gonna be able to score, they're gonna be able to do it all. And like you said, I'm just really hoping that most of these guys are healthy, so that they can really like unleash all of their skills and tools at the peak time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that you're also one of the other things that you've got in this group that maybe you haven't had in other groups is a lot of guys that have had a lot of success at the international level for USA, and that's we've been wondering for years, when is that going to translate at this level? And you look at guys that have won World Junior gold medals, that have been part of whether it was at the national team development program or elsewhere where they won gold medals at the under 18 level, the mystique of the other nations that used to exist for USA, where it was just like, we're kind of we're a little bit eyes open here, deer in headlight situation. I don't think that these guys grew up with that mentality. And that's what I think was really going to elevate the USA Canada rivalry, was that there isn't that there's a level of respect, but there is not that level of fear that I think existed even in the last time that we saw best on best. So really excited to see that kind of come to fruition. So two outstanding teams in USA and Canada, but really, you've also got a Swedish team and a Finnish team. Finland took some really, really tough injury hits late in the process that I think really diminishes their chances. But let's go to Sweden, because you look at this, and the one thing I look at Sweden, I'm like, I look at their forward group and I'm amazed at the level of talent, but I'm also like, is there enough variety in this roster? Does the Sweden just produce a lot of the same guy? Because that's kind of what I feel like as I look at this roster, in various shapes and sizes, kind of the same player. And you wonder, how is that going to translate when they play teams that have the balance of USA and Canada and also can still score down their lineups? It just seems to me that that's going to be really one of the key questions for Sweden to answer is, do they have enough up front to contend with the heaviness that they'll face between the other two teams?
Yeah, my guess is no. You look at that roster too, and you wonder. You're like, absolutely right. There's lots of skill, right? William Nylander, right? Like an elite offensive player. Jesper Bratt is having a terrific season. Phil Forsberg, has proven to be like a high end player. But there isn't that guy that you're like, okay, he's going to drag them into the fight. He's probably going to lead them in scoring. He's going to do everything that they need him to do. Elias Pettersson hasn't been that guy in nearly 12 months. He should be that guy on this team, but unless all of a sudden the light switch is flicked on, I don't see him being that guy dragging them into the fight. And so it's like, who's it going to be? Mika Zibanejad's not going to be doing it, right? Lucas Raymond's too young. It's just there's not that person, I don't think. So you're absolutely right. And they're not a very big team either, right? Like it's overall, they don't have a lot of power especially up front. On the blue line, they're going to have to really rely on Victor Hedman to play 30 minutes a night. And, Matthias Ekholm, he can bang and stuff like that. So they'll have it on the blue line a little bit more. Gustav Forsling can bring that element a little bit as well too. But I do think that they're going to have to come together and be like the ultimate team and play like tight systems, limit chances against, and then score at timely opportunities and get big saves, right? And so all of those things have to come together to work out for them, while also probably losing the projected starter in Jacob Markstrom. It's they have an uphill battle as clearly kind of like the projected 3 seed in this tournament.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and it sounds like the kind of play that they need to play that you're describing sounds very Finnish of in terms of of how they need to play, where it is opportunistic and not making mistakes and basically playing that tight system. I mean, yeah, you look at the situation like Leo Carlsson, who hasn't had a great season, on the team, and largely because, hey, we need somebody that has some size to them. We need somebody that's got a little bit of heaviness to them. And there are other players that can bring that to a certain extent, or they bring a heavier game, or, they play, but, you've got guys like Eriksson Ek and others that could, give you some of that defensive element. But really, I mean, the pressure that's going to be on that blue line, and it's a great blue. Like I really think that's a very talented blue line. I mean, you've got Hedman to play a lot. Does getting the Trey Kroner jersey on give Erik Karlsson that juice that he needs to kind of make that step? I think Rasmus Andersson is going to be a force for them, and a guy that's going to play a pretty significant role. Ekholm, who you mentioned. And then it's like, you need a guy like Erasmus Dahlin to really step up in this scenario. You need guys like that, because I do think the blue line is going to be a key to keeping them competitive. Good, solid defense, and then obviously moving pucks up to their forwards, transition team that, can put you on your heels a little bit. That's the hope. But then you look at the goaltending, and you mentioned Markstrom's out. It gives you Linus Ullmark's got a Vezina trophy. Philip Gustafsson, Samuel Ersson as the replacement for Markstrom. I mean, what a tremendous kind of gap between Connor Hellebuck and that group. And, I think that if Ullmark, I would probably take over all of the Canadian goalies, but at the same time, this isn't, do any of those guys steal a game for you? Ullmark certainly has the best chance to, but I mean, gosh, I feel like this is a team that's going to give up quite a few shots against in this tournament, even if they play that tight team defense that you're talking about being required. So if Sweden is going to make any noise whatsoever here, what do you think is going to have to happen? Who are maybe the 2 to 3 guys even that you say, this is the guy that just says, all right, I'm taking it over. We're going to pick off one of the North American teams in one of those games, because we're certainly not winning both of them. What are we going to do here? I mean, what is it going to take for this Swedish team beyond, that tight team defense? Who are the guys that have to step up here?
Yeah. So, you mentioned him and I didn't, and it's, Rasmus Dahlin is, so talented, and he's big and he can skate. Like, if he can be a number 1 D on that blue line and like play as like a top 5 defenseman in the world or more, that's going to go a long way, right? Because you still have Hedman. I think if Karlsson, like you mentioned, can just generate even like 75% of what we used to see from Erik Karlsson when he was in his prime, that'll be huge. But Elias Pettersson, he has to be the best forward on the team for them to really have a chance, I think, because he is, the most talented forward on that team. And I don't, just like the Canucks need him to be that player for them, he hasn't been that player. So my expectation is he will not be that player. But short tournament, lightning in a bottle, maybe it is the juice that wakes him up. Maybe it's the smelling salts that he needs to get going. Maybe him and JT Miller just square off at center ice in that Swedish USA game. Although, Petey doesn't want any of that smoke. No. Miller's too much to handle, I wouldn't imagine. But maybe something fun like that wakes him up and gets him going. But if those guys can really elevate their game and play to the level of their skill, then, they could be players that could make a big enough difference. And then, you do need to get the all-world goaltending. I think that's just like an automatic. If they're to knock off Canada or the US or both, their goaltending has to just be, locked down, seamed up.
Yeah, and I do still think, to me, the way that they can separate is if every single defenseman on their team, like, and I'm like, to a man, has some of his best hockey in him for the couple of weeks here, because it is gonna, the depth factor is not close between, USA, Canada, Sweden, and it's really not close when we talk about Finland. And I love me some Finland. I think that their forward group is really strong, but Miro Heiskanen is out, and that to me was the death knell for the whole thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I mean, Cam, I look up and down this roster, even UC Saros hasn't had his best this year. Who is ultimately going to be the starting goalie for them, between him and Kevin Lankinen and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. The D-core it's almost kind of stunning for Finland. You think that they've had these tremendous defensive teams. But, I look up front and I see Alexander Barkov. I see Sebastian Aho. I see guys like Rupe Hintz who have become a big-time player. Mikko Rantanen, who's big-time as well. And they have some guys that I think are going to be disruptive players and guys that are going to make an impact in this tournament one way or another. But it's just hard to find how are they going to keep up with the other three teams, at least in terms of scoring and stopping goals as well. I mean, I have some serious concerns about this blue line. Where do you see the pain points for this team most specifically?
I mean, like you said, the blue line, right? The blue line, it's just so tough. When you put it on paper compared to those other teams, it's like, ugh, losing Heiskanen.
Let's list it off real quick.
All right, Henry
let's list it off
Jokiharju.
real quick here, Cam.
Yeah,
I just want to list it off real quick because it's Henry Jokiharju, Esa Lindell, Olli Mata, Nico Mikkola, Rasmus Ristolainen, Urho Vakanainen, and Juuso Välimäki. And I love Finland. Great country. We spent some time in Helsinki last year. But wow, that is you put that on paper next to the other guys. Oh my goodness. So
right
now,
where's your Norris?
Yes.
Where's your Norris contender, right? Where's that guy? He's on the injured reserve. Miro Heiskanen was going to play 45 minutes a night on that blue line. And I was looking forward to it because I've got all the time in the world for him. He's an all-world player, but so obviously that blue line, but hey, like maybe this is the story where this like misfit group of defenders that has size and has some like bang, they can play some defense too. Maybe they just like come together and they just shut it right down. I'm not betting on that happening though, but maybe it is, right? And then up front, like, you mentioned the big three. It's Barkov, it's Aho, and it's Rantanen. And those three can compete with any team's top line, right? Like that is like, like, those are top tier players. And then it's like, okay. Now we move down the lineup a little bit. Now you're looking at guys like Rupe Hintz and Patrick Laine and, maybe it's Teuvo Teravainen or Terry Lehkonen or something like that. It's like, okay, now we're pushing into the guys on the other teams that are more like their third or fourth line, and that's your second line guy. And then we got Joel Armia, Ito Luosterainen, it falls off. Capo Caco, who's, rejuvenated a bit in Seattle, but so they're going to need scoring from committee. They're going to need Patrick Laine to be that one-shot finisher that he has shown capable of doing. Like if he gets red hot, right, he could score 10 goals in a tournament like this, right? Like he's that talented of a goal scorer. So that's the kind of thing that needs to happen, is that they need to get on that Swami jersey and just like turn superhero, just Hulk out over there. And then obviously have those big three be like, three of the best players of the tournament. They need to have, whether it's Saros or Lankinen, I think those are kind of the two that are projected to get the most starts anyways. One of them just like goes on a bender. I'm sure they're going to try to make that UC Saros, but Lankinen has been really, really strong this year too. So I think that they, like we said about Sweden, they have an uphill battle. These guys, without that stud on the blue line, where every other team has at least one like super stud, probably three or four, it's just like night and day. They won't, wave after wave of American or Canadian attack coming at them it's going to be so difficult for them to limit, a team to even like 30 shots, let alone to keep them to like 1 or 2 goals in a game. It's going to be really, really challenging.
I can't agree more. And it pains me too, because, I think that when you have the Four Nations, you're hoping that you're going to consolidate the talent, and it hasn't worked out that way this year. The other thing that's crazy, UC Saros hasn't put on a Finland jersey since 2016. Like it's pretty wild that it's been that long since he's played internationally. And obviously it's usually because he's not available because he's in the playoffs or something else. Yeah. But I mean, it's been quite some time, and he's a guy that had some tremendous moments. And the one thing I will say about this Finland team is you've got enough guys that have had some success internationally, a couple World Junior Champions in there, a couple of guys that have turned it on that international stage, and so many of them we just haven't seen. And then you have that tremendous team defense that has been a hallmark of Finnish national teams. Do those guys bring that back, or is it more kind of this more open style that they have the more skill to play with guys like Barkov, Rantanen, and Aho? But yeah, it's going to be interesting. So those are the 4 teams. The tournament begins next week. We're going to kind of get into our Beyond Belief segment too, to talk a little bit more about the Four Nations. But the last thing that before we do get into the Beyond Belief is, we look at kind of what's happened with these teams and what they're going to ultimately look like over the course of this tournament. We talked about carrying and all those things. I mean, does this tournament, like, is it going to really impact anybody's legacy in the way that like Canada Cups and World Cups kind of did for a time? I don't know that anybody really thinks about the 2016 World Cup ever outside of Team North America. But for this to work, to grow the game, I feel like it's got to mean something. And while it means something to the players based on ticket sales and buzz, I'm not sure that it's there for the fans. And so, you're going to be there. You're going to be able to see it on the ground. You're going to be able to kind of feel it. And I think usually sometimes like outdoor games and everything else, you almost have to be there to appreciate it. Maybe that'll be the case. But I mean, in the end, is it going to matter? Like that's kind of what I'm coming to. And your thoughts in general on that.
No, it's not. Like, I mean, when we look at guys, when they're putting up their resumes for like, is he a Hall of Famer, right? Does he have 500 goals in the league? Did he hit 1,000 games? Does he have any individual hardware? What did he do internationally? And we're looking at, World Juniors, we're looking at World Cups, we're looking at Olympics, right? The triple gold crown and all these types of things, Stanley Cup wins, obviously. No one's going to be looking at the resume and be like, that dude's got a Four Nations Faceoff championship. Now, unless this becomes a regular thing, and it does become, maybe it's no longer the Four Nation, maybe it's the Five Nation, and then the Six Nation, right? Or whatever they want to do. If they want to build it out and it becomes like a regular thing, then it could become that. But if it's just a one-off, similar to that 2016 World Cup, where you're absolutely right. Like the only cool thing about that tournament was Team North America, which was a gimmick, and took some of the best players off of the other countries' teams. But just gave us an opportunity to have a look at some of those really elite young players that maybe wouldn't have broke onto some of the other ones. So that was cool, but it was a gimmick and it was a one-off. So it's like, who cares? So if this is a one-off too, it won't matter, historically for any of these players. It won't move the needle for them. But I do still think they want to win. I do still think that a player like Sidney Crosby, especially like some of these older players, and I'm really hoping Sid's going to be healthy so I can ask him this and nobody steal this question, media members, is, when you're a player that's so competitive like he is, to have not won a playoff series in so long, have not won the last game of the season in so many years, what does it mean to have an opportunity to go to a tournament like this and find success and find glory and win the last game and be a champion again, right? Like even if it's not something as glamorous as an Olympic gold medal, how is that going to feel? What kind of motivation is that going to be for players like him or like a Brad Marchand, right? This is probably the last chance he's going to get to compete for something like that. No offense to Boston, but they're probably not a cup contender anymore in the rest of his tenure now until he retires. So these last opportunities for some of these guys to really push it up and be like, this could be the last big thing I win. I assume Sid will be in Italy next year for the Olympics, but still, is that the few and far between those opportunities remaining in some of these guys' careers. So I do think it means a lot to those guys. But you're absolutely right. The buzz and the ticket sales have not been helping generate it, like to get the hype up. And I had a buddy of mine who was just saying, here, we're out in British Columbia, and he was like, my wife and I, we considered like flying to Montreal to catch one of the Canadian games. But like you tack on your flights and everything. But then he's like, we're looking at tickets and they were like $600-700 for nosebleeds. And it's like, that's just, you're not really welcoming the everyday fan with those type of prices, right? Where you could spend $600 for Sweden, Finland, and maybe get into the first deck or something like that. But it's as hockey has, continued to become more and more elitist, right? It's an expensive sport to play, and to have your kids in and to go and watch NHL games is not cheap, especially if you're in a Canadian market or in a market that's finding success. And so I definitely don't feel like this is a grow the game opportunity. Number one, because of the prices are astronomical to get in, but also because the four nations that are involved in it right now are probably the four biggest hockey playing countries in the world. Russia's right there too. So it's like you're not breeding nationalistic hype from Slovenia or from some Poland or Austria, where it's the grassroots are trying to welcome in another big fish like China or something like that. So you're not looking to really grow the game internationally, but it is an opportunity for the best on best from these four nations that are healthy to really show their stuff and compete for something. And I think once you're there and the people that are in the building, the hype should be high and it should be emotional and there should be a lot of energy in the building, and I hope, and around the cities and all that good stuff too. So hopefully it is a success in the long run.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to reserve judgment until we see it, right? Like I think it's one of those things where we just don't know, and until it happens, like I remember I was very critical of Team North America, and ended up being my favorite thing about the 2016 World Cup because nothing else about it mattered. Like it was, and I just think that the NHL has some tremendous opportunities with things like this, that I would like to see them be a little bit better with them in terms of making them matter. I think that this is a good experiment, but I think it's an experiment that will likely end here. I think they're going to try and get the World Cup going once again. And then, but really, until it's the Olympics, it just doesn't feel like it matters that much. And we'll talk about that in our Beyond Belief segment as well, in one of our questions there. So let's get to that, because we can talk a little bit more and put a bow on our Four Nations preview here, Cam, with one of our favorite segments, and certainly one of the listeners' favorite segments, which is Beyond Belief, where we take a statement. One of us provides a statement. The other will decide if it's believable or beyond belief. And the first one I get to throw at my co-host here: Canada's goaltending will be its Achilles heel in this tournament, possibly preventing Canada from winning the whole thing.
It's going to be their Achilles heel. Now, the question is whether or not they're going to take an arrow to the Achilles, right? Like that's the whole thing, is that the team has been dipped, it's being held by its Jordan Binnington as it goes in there, and he didn't get any on him. So yeah, it's a weak spot for sure. And it will probably be exposed at some points, but we'll see if it's enough to take them down. And I'm not ready to say that. I'm not ready to say that it's going to be a weak enough that it's going to cost them the championship. But if there is anything that is going to cost them this championship, it will be in net.
Yeah. And I think it will. I mean, I think you need that. If there's anything here, and it's something that Canada's going to have to figure out going before the Olympics. Like, and yes, there are other options, but even like Logan Thompson, who's having a great season, we don't have this sustained track record. I mean, you look back at the 2010, I mean, Luongo, you're talking prime Luongo in 2010. You're talking about a Marty Brodeur that was still able to do it at a high level. Marc-Andre Fleury at a high level. There was this litany of goalies, and USA had the same, they had the same embarrassment of riches at the time. But the gap is so significant to me in this tournament, when you could say, I would probably still take UC Saros over all those guys as well, and there's just it to me, I feel like when the margins are going to be so narrow to win this thing, I feel like that's one where Canada is in a losing proposition. And I mean, I could be wrong where it's Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, and it's just like too much for everybody. It could very well be that, but man, I can't get over, like believing that that's a viable best on best goalie trio. So that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, it is incredible how far it has fallen from those guys, from Price, Luongo, Brodeur, Waugh. Like, it's just like Marc-Andre. It was just, and you're right? The Americans had it too. They had, Belfour and Richter, but they didn't fall off, right? It was, Canada has fallen off precipitously, and there isn't really an end in sight. Like, maybe Josh Ravensbergen is the guy, right? Maybe they wait 6 years and that's their 6'5" stud in net, right? But it's a long time coming, this issue.
Right. Yeah. Cause like you're even thinking maybe it's Levi, maybe it's Kosa, maybe it's, these guys. And it's just like, maybe it's not, like that's, it's going to be, there's a lot left to figure out. Although Devin Levi and Sebastian Kosa look good in the AHL this year, but again, there's still a long way for them to get to where they're at. But we move on. We keep talking about this exciting international showcase.
Okay. I got a really difficult one for you here. Okay. Losing Miro Heiskanen will sink Finland's chances of glory. It was all sewed up for them, but they lost Miro and now it's sunk.
Yeah. I mean, with him, it was going to be an uphill battle. Without him, it's impossible. And you mentioned, I think when you lose a guy, the thing about international tournaments is there can be moments where a player elevates to such a level that allows them to take over games and allows them to will their team to maybe some victories that they wouldn't otherwise get. But as I mentioned, I think the margins for this are very thin. And then you look at the precipitous drop off. It was already going to be big without him. Now it's really impossible. Because basically you're going to have him out there probably every other shift, not quite that pronounced, but certainly in the most meaningful games, he's going out there every couple of shifts here. And the thing is it's not just that it sinks their chances. I think it sinks their ability to be competitive, period. If they go 0 for this tournament, it wouldn't shock me. And it pains me to say that as somebody that loves international hockey. But I mean, I still, until you actually look at it on paper as we did, and as I read those names off, Cam, it was like, oh no, oh no, this is getting worse. So it wasn't, Finland was... The thing about Finland is you can never really count them out internationally because they always seem to find their best. I mean, I think of the years of all the Olympic medals that they tacked up just because they outwilled people. And I think that they will be very competitive that way. But, I mean, there's not much left to say. We kind of said it already, but, I mean, that was one where I just was like, we got to talk. We got to talk about it again because it's just like, it also goes to show you just how much we think of Miro Heiskanen as well. I mean, like, this is a guy that's a super stud in the league, and to lose a player of that caliber, it's impossible.
Okay, what do you got for me?
All right. I got the next one. Team USA is the most complete team in the tournament. Most complete team. Ooh.
No, I will say they're not the most complete team. I don't think their blue line is diverse enough to say they're the most complete. I'll give it to Canada by a hair. I will say that they are, oh God, I don't even know if I'll say they're the most talented, but they might have the most puck moving ability, but they don't have that bang them up on the blue line that I think Canada is going to try to run them through the end boards. That'll probably be the way that the coaches will be like, we got to wear them down. We got to make them feel pain and make them look over their shoulders and second guess their ability, which is good luck against Quinn Hughes or Adam Fox to pull it off. But I'll say Canada is the most complete team at the tournament. And the USA is number 2. How about you?
Well, I mean, you know where I'm going with this. There's a reason I put it on the list. I think, of course, they're the most complete team. I think it starts from the net out. And I think Connor Hellebuck having the goaltending, they have the most depth at that position of any of the teams in this tournament. And I think Connor Hellebuck is the X factor. But you have to have more than goaltending. And I think I completely agree. I think there is concern about the lack of balance on the blue line where you don't have that big punisher. I do think Noah Hannafin is a guy that can play a physical brand of playoff winning hockey. He hasn't had as many opportunities in his career to really showcase that. And I think that this is going to be an opportunity for him to do that. I think that, the style that he plays at Vegas is going to be supportive of that. Jacob Slavin, most gentlemanly defenseman in the league, but he is a tough guy to get around. He competes. But to me, I think I also look at that forward group and I look at the speed, I look at the talent. I say, you got a top 9 that can score. You got a fourth line that's going to be anchored by a Brock Nelson with probably Vince Trocheck and Chris Kreider. I think that's a heavy line. I think that's an agitating line. Maybe it kind of depends on where you're going to put JT Miller, the Kachucks. There's that heaviness up front, I feel like, to make up for what is not there on the back end. So I think while I completely agree that they're not diverse enough on the back end, and I don't necessarily think there was an option to make them more diverse on the back end that would have been a credible addition to this team. I just think that
right?
This is for say who?
Sorry, Trouba? Could have got him out there running.
I mean, I love Jacob Trouba, and he could be a bopper, but I mean, we've seen how this season has gone,
and
but I do think that you look at the way that the team was constructed. To me, I look at Canada's goaltending is, to me, the separating factor. So it's part of the reason why I also included that in Beyond Belief is that I think that there is that. So to me, USA has the most complete roster. Do I think that guarantees them the win? No, I don't. I think that we're looking at several games of real intense physical play and fast hockey. I don't think we've seen anything that has touched the 2010 Olympics in terms of quality of play in best on best in the last, 15 years now. I think we're going to get as close to that in those USA Canada games as we've been.
Man, that was fun in 2010. Hey, boy,
it really was.
Yeah, especially for us Canadians. Dig. We're gonna have some fun this next couple weeks. Okay, finally, the Four Nations here. It's gonna set the table for the Olympics in 2026, and now, so it's gonna set the table. Like I'm saying, it's gonna gear up. It's gonna give the GMs and selections. They're gonna see who they want to be targeting for the next round, for who's gonna make that team. It's gonna set the stage for who's gonna be favorites moving in. Right? Are we going to have a new number 1 seed at the top international hockey here after this? Is it going to like really set the table to be like Finland? Unfortunately, like you might not even be a top 4 team at the Olympics. You might not be a top 6 team at the Olympics, right? With some of these other ones coming up. The Four Nations is going to set the table for the 26 Olympics.
I think yes. I believe that. I believe it's going to do it, especially for the North American teams. There are going to be guys that are going to falter in this tournament that are going to play themselves right out of the Olympics. There are going to be guys that they're going to be like, we cannot trust you ever again. This is not what we're going to do. And I think that is honestly, I've always thought that this is how that tournament should be used. I think you want to have experimentation. I would have preferred that over, hey, let's put a team that can win us the Four Nations. What does that ultimately get you? Nothing. So you have to use this for that. I think every single game is an evaluation point. It would have been great. I would have loved to see 6 nations in. I would love to see Slovakia and Czechia. Obviously Russia is not going to be involved. By the way, that is going to continue because the IIHF is saying no, not in 2025, 26. It's going to be up to the International Olympic Committee if they're going to let a Russian team under probably the Olympic athletes of Russia or whatever play in that tournament. So, the fact that we're not going to get Alex Ovechkin in one of these again does kind of sting a little bit. But I think that this is, and I do think this is going to tell us a little bit about the favorites. And I think that it's also going to kind of set the narrative going forward. And to me, that is the most valuable thing about this tournament. That's the only reason that it matters, is that we are going to get our appetites wet for this. And then they are going to be moving into this next phase, into Olympic preparation. All the storylines are going to be tied to this. So that to me is the most exciting thing about this tournament. And like, I that's why I talked, earlier, does it matter? Who wins doesn't matter, but it does set the narrative going forward. So, I'm not going to run out. If USA wins this, I'm not going out to get Four Nations Faceoff champions merch, nor is anyone. And if you print it, and they will, but if you print it, sad. If you buy it, worse. So yeah. That's what I'm saying. But that's my thought on it. I think it does set the tone going forward. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I just copy paste. Like that's pretty much it. Like, I tell my kid when he's, playing games for a team he's going to be trying out for next year or something, every game's a tryout, right? Like, especially in this situation, it's like, you're absolutely right. They are going to be looking at you not to win this tournament, but they're looking at you. Can you play on this team when it really matters next year? And so it will set the tone, set the table. Not to say, all of a sudden, Canada falls and ends up third or something like that they're going to be like projected to not compete in 2026 for a gold medal. But I do think we're gonna glean some information from this, and it's going to impact decisions moving forward for that Olympics for sure.
Yeah, no question. I mean, and it'll teach us about things. Was USA not balanced enough? Was Canada's goaltending as big a problem as we thought? Was Sweden not diverse enough up front? These are the types of things that we're going to be able to at least have an idea about. And hopefully everybody does take good lessons from this. But again, if you're buying a Four Nations Faceoff champion shirt, I can't help you. But, whatever.
There goes my side hustle revenue. The cheese. I'm going to have a garage full of these t-shirts now. Got them printed. They're coming from China.
Yeah. Also, I want to put it out there right now. I will not retweet you if you are showing off your Four Nations Faceoff tattoo before the tournament to show how much you believe in your country for this tournament. And if you do that, may God have mercy on your soul. All right. That's so yes. So Four Nations Faceoff starts on February 12th. It'll be available in the US and Canada, and on TV, I believe the regular NHL rights holders have everything. You can watch all the games on Sportsnet and ESPN and all that fun stuff. But it's going to be very interesting to watch the that event and see just how fired up everybody gets. I think over that week of hockey, it should be a lot of fun, but we'll go from there. Before we get out of here, I did want to talk a little bit about the NHL draft, as this is the Prospects podcast, and we just talked about a whole bunch of guys that are well established and superstars. But we're still in the midst of the draft season. We've talked a little bit about how the 2025 draft is getting a little bit, not great. We talked a little bit about the draft value. But one thing, business is picking up a little bit in the country of Sweden for one guy. Anton Frondell has had a good couple of weeks of hockey here. I keep talking about him because I came into the season thinking he was going to be a top tier guy. It hadn't worked out at the beginning of the season. He'd been injured, but he had his first 4-point game, first multi-point game in Swedish pro hockey. He's getting a lot of shots on goal. And then at the very beginning of the U18 Five Nations, which is an Ängelholm right now, he opens up with a 3-point game against USA. USA, we've documented some of their struggles, not as strong of a team this year, but still Anton Frondell starting to heat up a little bit. I mean, I do think this is going to matter for him. And I think especially with the weakness of this class, there's all the time in the world for Anton Frondell to get back into the discussion of maybe top 10, top 5, maybe, probably not for you. But, based on our conversations that we've had, but, I think that we're starting to see the guy that we saw at the end of last season.
Nah, he's a second rounder. No, it has been good. He popped off for the 4 points there, right? 2 goals, 2 assists in that game. He backed it up with another goal the game after that. But, sandwiched around it was, I think, 6 pointless outings. And then another pointless outing right after that too. So it's not like he is really in fuego here, but you're playing against a weak American team. That Five Nations tournament, it's like Sweden is jacked up, right? Like they've got Frondell, they've got Viggo Bjork, who might be the most dangerous player on that team, is another 2026 eligible, who I've got a lot of time for, exciting prospect for next year. So Sweden is like clearly the favorites, but he broke some ankles, especially on that one goal. I believe it was a shorty. In that opener, like that was real nice. And, he's a finisher, he can shoot it too. And his second goal showed that too. So it is good to see these steps. And if he can go back to the Allsvenskan, and if he could play it like a half point a game down the stretch in the Hockey Allsvenskan, like you have my attention. And now if you can go to the U18s in May and come to Texas and have some barbecue with us there, Anton, and then like show out really well now I'm really interested. So he has to kind of climb that mountain to get back into kind of me considering him as a top 10 pick. I think showing what he's showing right now is like, it's good. It's good. And like I said, maybe a couple weeks ago, I think I said it on this show, is that I felt like I had arguably the best viewing on him that I'd had all year. And it was, 1 goal in 10 minutes of ice or 9 minutes of ice. And he played like a real pacey game. And I'm like, that's a perfect, number 20 overall pick in most drafts. That you're like, hey, that's a good player. That's a first rounder right there. So I need more examples of that elite offense to really move him up too much further than 14 or 15. But big body, plays the middle of the ice, is playing pro hockey. So if he can keep that going, if he can finish the Five Nations, won't move the needle for me too much. But if he can go back and really show well on a consistent basis while getting 14, 15 minutes a night, and like I said, a half point a game, and then the U18s, right, where all the big dogs are there, where we're all just rubbing elbows with all the GMs and directors of scouting, and we're all sitting there eating our snacks together and getting our coffees. If he can really blow it up at that tournament, that's going to be the real needle mover for him, at least perception wise, amongst teams that will push him up draft boards. Because when the GMs are there watching, they don't get to travel, they don't get to be on the road and scout all these tournaments like we do. So it's the big events that if you can really show out in front of them, that at the end of the day is that they make the first round picks. They trust their staff, but they get to make the first pick, and the scouts usually get to make all the picks after that. So if he can really show out the rest of the year, but that U18s I think is going to be circled on his calendar, is that like, if I want to move up into that top 10, that's where I'm really going to have to show out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, I haven't gotten a great feedback in terms of normally this February Five Nations has been one of the most scouted events, but in the years since Russia has been out of it, fewer and fewer scouts are jumping the pond, especially when you have an opportunity to watch them at the under 18 World. So I think, a good showing there probably not going to go as far as you mentioned, something at the under 18 Worlds. And that's in Frisco, Texas. Can't wait for that. As you mentioned, we're definitely going to have some barbecue there. But
Ooh, yeah.
he's going to have to cook. He is going to have to cook at that tournament. No question about it. But the thing is that I'm starting to see glimmers of that player and that confidence that really struck me last year of a play, like just, I'm like, who is this guy? And now we're at least seeing glimmers of it. So that's good. Also wanted to just, we touched on this last time we got together, but the diminishing value of 2025 first round picks. And we're starting to see, some of the trades have started happening. And I think this is one, and this is more of this isn't so much of an opinion as it's just a caution statement. If your team is shedding late first round picks this year, I almost don't care. Like, I don't think you ever want to give up draft capital without getting something of higher value in return. This is one of those years where it's just like, don't be shocked if that first round doesn't get you what you thought. Because we did talk about it. It's getting, as I put, our midterm list together, I just continue to look, as I watch more players, I'm just still trying to find what is this class all about? Where are the players that are going to be, that get you out of your seat after, 13? And the fact of the matter is, we're just not seeing them that much. So, I know you've been kind of pounding the pavement a little bit and just, is that even going to get stuff done for the top rentals? I mean, is it gonna give you any opportunity to add those types of players that can make an impact for you?
Well, we already saw, right, with
Right.
JT Miller, is that so teams are dangling their 2025 first, right? And sellers are asking for 2026 first, unprotected. And so that JT Miller trade, right, it showed it that it was a top 13 protected in 25, unprotected in 26, holds a lot more value than just like a pick from a contender that's definitely going to be a 2025 pick. And that's why Pittsburgh wanted that pick rather than the original Vancouver pick that they could have offered at any point. And so the value on an unprotected 26, especially in a team like the Rangers where they are an aging core where it's something the bottom could fall out, has a chance to be like a franchise altering pick if you fall into that top 5, top 3 if you're really lucky. So teams are definitely, from the ones I'm talking to, they understand, right? Their scouting staff knows what's going on. They're like, yeah, go ahead and ship our 25 pick if you have to. But if you're buying, like, go ahead and go get us more 26 picks. So it's just part and parcel of a weaker class. Someone asked me, like, what would you rather have, like 14th overall this year or like 20 overall next year? And it's like, like that's probably a comparable thing. But would you, if we're talking about putting value on it, like is the 22nd, 23rd overall pick this year, like, more comparable to like a second rounder most years or strong years? I think so, right? I think so. And that's when I'm filling out my list and we're doing it Elite Prospects, I'm looking at some of these guys that I've got in the 20s and I'm like, I would not feel great about taking this player at 22. Like this is a day 2 player. And now he's going to be a day 1 player. And that's just because this is a weaker class. And so, yes, absolutely. I think teams they're valuing them appropriately in both buying and selling.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I think this year more than ever, those back half of the first round picks, maybe don't put as much pressure on those guys as the normal first round picks get pressure put on them, because quite frankly, in most years, they wouldn't have been there. So that's just the way it goes. But the reason everybody's so excited about 2026, and it has more to do than with this, but we got, Gavin McKenna, he continues to be insane. 88 points in 42 games. He is on an absolute tear. There have only been 3 games all season where he did not record a point. He's not been held off of the score sheet in a WHL game since November. I mean, this is the guy that is continually just putting our jaws on the floor at all times. And then last week he ended up playing a game against Everett and Landon Dupont, who is not the guy that could go number 1 the following year. So you're the number 1, could be a contender for number 1. So, so these are all the different things that we're seeing here. Cam, you are, you're in WHL country. I mean, the Gavin McKenna buzz, it's been there. it kind of tapered off a little bit after World Juniors, but I mean, it's in full bore again, is it not? I mean, like, how can you not love what this kid brings to the table?
He's so impressive. Like I know a lot of people like that World Junior performance was probably their first look at him for more casual fans, and that, you know, he was still arguably the most threatening offensive player for that team as being a double underager too. But you know, he is so cerebral. He's like, you know, his playmaking, his puck skills, his ability to dart in and out of traffic. Like you said, you know, 18 goals, 59 points over his current 25 or 26 game point streak. You know, he's on the season, he's shooting like 4.5 pucks per game, but over this little stretch, it's like dipped down to 3.5. But his conversion rate spiked up to over 20, right? So it's like he's adding that more like lethal finishing ability. So because I do see him as more of like a playmaker off the wing, like a Nikita Kucherov style sort of thing. But like, he is so good. And that 2026 class, like, he's at the top of the heap, but we have Ivar Stenberg, we have Viggo Bork, we have Ryan Rubrek, who's got like, you know, 70 plus points in 40 odd games in the OHL too, right? Like there's,
big time
you know,
player.
Keaton Verhoff, this big awesome player for the Victoria Royals and the WHL, defenseman too. Like there are so many really exciting players in that one, and McKenna is like head and shoulders too at this point. He doesn't have the size, is like the only thing that's the knock on him, is he isn't 6'3" and plays the middle of the ice, but superstar level talent who's showing why he is, you know, the consensus number one next year. And that like lottery teams are already positioning themselves to get the best chance they can at him, similar to what we saw with Bedard, what we saw with Matthews, what we saw with McDavid. Is that he's that, maybe not, you know, we won't put him in that class just yet with those last two names I mentioned, but he has the ability to change the complexion of a franchise long term.
Yeah, no question about it. And he is a guy that, you know, I can't wait to see what comes next. You know, we're talking about the possibility of him being that first big name to go to the NCAA next year, if that's going to ultimately be the choice that he makes. You know, he's on pace right now for 124 points on the season, and he had 97 last year. And again, we're talking about a guy that is only 17 and just turned 17 in December. So this is something else. But they also, in the WHL, I mentioned that they played against each other. Big milestone for Landon Dupont, who is the exceptional status defenseman this year. He's 2027 draft eligible. You know, just incredible. He is the first rookie defenseman especially among U17, you know, U17 players, first rookie defenseman to have 50 points in a season since Scott Niedermayer. And he's 15. So Landon Dupont is 15. Scott Niedermayer was 16 when he did it, just so everybody knows. 50 points for Landon Dupont. He is everything we thought he would be. We saw him last year. He was on FloHockey a lot on the CSSHL. And, you know, got to see he dominated at that level, but he made the jump to the WHL, and you see the skating ability, the vision, just the fluidity of play. He is breathtaking to watch. He is a relaxing hockey player to watch. I don't know if he like you watch him skate, you watch him handle the puck, and you're like, everything is fine. It's like ASMR. Like, you're just like, I'm just totally dialed in right now. You know, Cam, I mean, we haven't seen a lot like him, and we certainly have never seen an exceptional status defenseman in the WHL. I mean, there is something, whatever is going on in Western Canada right now, we need to get to the bottom to it. And I know that Landon spent a lot of time in Europe as well, because his dad, Mickey, was a playing pro over there. But what is going on? We have yet another mega talent that we are talking about this far out from his own draft year.
He is something else, hey? Like, Everett is must-see TV after being just like so bad before that too, right? Like, him and Carter Bear are so much fun, right? There's so much fun on that team. But I did really enjoy that marquee game where it was where it was McKenna and Dupont, and, you know, like, McKenna just like bullied him, just like took his lunch money, stuffed him in a locker, and was like, settle down, 15-year-old. You're a freshman here. This is my school. And so that was, you know, he picked his pocket for that one of those shorties he scored too. But no, Dupont, like, it's just incredible. Like everything he's doing, like the production, the play, just the poise that he plays at. Yeah, he makes some mistakes every now and again, but he's a righty too, which only just like adds a little extra juice to his upside too. He was 5'11", so that's the only thing. But he's 15 years old. He's probably got 3 years of growth left ahead of him here too. So all likelihood is going to end up being hopefully a 6'1", 6'2", or taller defender in the NHL. So consensus in 2027, it's a long ways out, but like what's he going to do for an encore next year? And then the year after that as a draft eligible. So we might be looking, right? You just mentioned, is Gavin McKenna going to be that first big piece to fall that moved to the NCAA for a draft eligible season? Well, if he is, is Landon Dupont going to be that next big domino piece that follows the same thing? And like, the CHL is listening to that and just like, they do not want to hear that whatsoever. They will do everything in their power to especially hold on to these draft eligible guys. Like, Michael Misa, Porter Martone, once they're drafted, if they leave, I guess they'll celebrate it, but they do not want to lose these draft eligible kids. But it's a threat for both of those.
Yeah. And it'll, and I think, the CHL will always be tied to those players. It is there is an actual tangible benefit to players being drafted directly out of your program from the NHL. There's a monetary benefit to that. But on top of that, I think that these two guys have really, and really the WHL as a whole over the last couple of years, it has been the home of the elite of the elite. And it's been pretty remarkable to watch. You have Connor Bedard come through. This will be a big year for Ontario. In the draft. But man, it is really getting to be a lot of fun to see these young players continue to come through. And Landon Dupont is the latest of them all. So if you have not yet seen him, make sure you do get a chance to see him, because you'll want to say, I got to see him right before he hit the big time. He has been really, really impressive. All right. Well, it gets to that time of the show where we are going to wrap it up, but we always wrap it up one way, and that's basically an either or. So you can only pick one of these options that I give you. So and we've had a few of these in the last couple of weeks, and it can get a little bit different. But this one I feel is where we are going to differ. And I picked this purposely. So we go back to our Four Nations discussion. You can pick one. You get USA's goaltending or you get Canada's scoring. What are you taking? How you got to win the tournament, Cam. You pick one or the other. What are you taking between those two options?
Man, because the old saying, right? Like, show me a good coach and I'll show you a good goaltender, right? Is that those you usually win off of a goaltender, but I'm gonna say that there's such voodoo, right? Like, is that guys can get red hot, guys can get in their heads. It's such a mental game in net there. Give me Canada scoring. Give me Connor McDavid and Nate Mack blazing down 100 miles an hour with Sid, ripping a backhander harder than I've ever shot a puck in my life on the forehand. I'm going Canada scoring over USA's goaltending, and I think we're going to see a couple of just some greasy goals and some bar down snipes and maybe some highlight reel ones there too. And Connor Hellebuck's just going to be looking for his jock in the corner at the end of this thing.
Yeah, well, let's go to the cliche. Let's go to the cliche. You build from the net out. And I, if it wasn't Connor Hellebuck, let's say it was Jake Ottinger, who I think is a tremendous goalie, or Jeremy Swayman, who I think is a tremendous goalie, I'm not feeling that confident when I look at the other side. But when I see Connor Hellebuck with 42 games played this season, a .925 save percentage, 6 shutouts, having a career year in the National Hockey League, the timing is working out in just such a way that USA is going to have that advantage. So I think it's going to be Connor Hellebuck. If USA is winning, it is Connor Hellebuck's. It's all him. Like, I love that there's great scoring, there's good defensive, there's good puck moving. They are not going to win that tournament without an incredible performance from Connor Hellebuck. And if you give me the choice, scoring can be streaky too. And goalies can be voodoo, but scoring can be streaky. You just need him to be good for a couple of weeks here. And he's been good all season. Give me Connor Hellebuck.
All right, CP, we got to do this. We didn't do this for the World Juniors. We didn't put anything on the line. Thank goodness. Because I would have had that American flag cramp stamp at the end of it. But I wasn't as confident right? So What are we
Yes.
doing? What are we doing? Are we wearing like losers wearing the other team's jersey for the next pod, like or the in a couple weeks here? What's the stakes? We got to come up with something here.
Okay, yeah, we got to. Okay, stakes. I like this. I think, yeah, I think there's certainly a jersey possibility. There's certainly a jersey possibility. I think that if I had to wear a Maple Leaf for an entire program, that would be tough. But I was thinking like something that would be memorable. Like if Canada wins, I gotta chug like some maple syrup or something.
Yes,
And
Super
then
Trooper
you've
style.
got to, yeah. But then what is the American equivalent of that then?
Right, I got to eat a
Maybe you
hot
just
dog
have
or
to eat a
something. What
stick
do you
of
guys got
butter.
going on? Yeah,
You have to eat a stick of
That's
raw
good.
butter on.
I got to get diabetes and have low test scores, or like pay for my medical bill or something. Like what I got to do here?
Hey, that's enough out of you, Canadian.
Yeah, too easy.
No, I think yeah. Like I've got some USA threads here in the house. I can ship to you to put on, because I fully expect. So let's do it. I'll rock the Maple Leaf, because I don't feel like chugging maple syrup. I'm trying to avoid those things. Just look at the screen and you'll see why. And then yeah, if the USA wins, yeah, if nobody clipped that. If USA wins, then you will be rocking the red, white, and blue. So, all right, we'll have to wait. We're going to record next week, hopefully, while you're there. I'm excited for you. I'm jealous of you for being there, because I think it will be great hockey, regardless of whether the importance. But Cam, before you get out of here, tell us a little bit more about your coverage. What do you got coming up at Elite Prospects, so that we know what is on the way from your Four Nations coverage?
Yeah, boots on the ground. But I was talking to our editor there, and I got a meeting here coming up. It's like I don't want to do the regular thing where it's like, oh, here's a roster breakdown of each team, blah blah blah. So I got a fun one, kind of like a bold predictions. I got 10 bold predictions from mild to wild. So that's going to be coming out right before the event. On site, be doing some fun stuff with some of the guys. Maybe get some video done with them. I'm going to sit down and talk to, like I mentioned, to Crosby about what this means to him, or like different things, like a guy like Jake Gensel never getting to put this the first time putting on an American jersey. Those kind of fun things like that. I've got a really big piece going on right now that I'm interviewing a bunch of current GMs, former GMs, AGMs, presidents of hockey ops, directors of analytics and scouting and stuff like that. And I'm putting together this big article on how, I'm calling it the anatomy of a trade, how a big money deal goes down mid-season and everything that goes into it, and all the roadblocks and how you use the media and all this. So I think that's going to be super, super interesting. So I'm going to be working on that all throughout the tournament as well, to get ready to drop that, closer to the deadline. But so those are a couple of big things on the way from me at Elite Prospects.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm excited to see all that. As I mentioned at the top of the show, please check out all of our stuff at FloHockey regarding the AHL All-Star Classic. Lots of behind-the-scenes stuff. You can check it out on our social channels as well. Mic'd up. We also put Meta Smart glasses on guys, so we're getting the best hockey POV videos that I've personally seen, a little bit better than the GoPro options that you've seen mounted on a chest or on a helmet. This is actually right in the guy's eyeballs, so you're going to be able to see exactly what the players see. Really cool stuff there. But yeah, a lot of other things coming up on FloHockey. Obviously, we're getting closer to the playoff race, so make sure you are subscribed so you can follow the playoff race in the AHL and the ECHL and the USHL and all these other leagues that we are so proud to cover and carry. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of stuff going on. But we will get back together next week here on Called Up the Prospects podcast, because, hey, there's going to be a lot to talk about, and some actual hockey games will have happened by the time we talk next time. But really cannot wait for that. Cam, I hope you have a great time out in Montreal and Boston. I will have a great time at home coaching the youth hockey teams and trying to make the future of America bright from the great state of Iowa. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun, pal. Always fun to chat with you. I hope you have a tremendous rest of your week. Can't wait to see you next time, pal.
Yeah, thanks again, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. For Cam Robinson, I am Chris Peters. This is Called Up the Prospects podcast. We will see you next week.